Sounds like Mr. Beach was an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. That is one phrase that wraps him up. He was an entrepreneur at the time of the beginning of the Industrial Revolution when the world was changing, and he wasn't the only one pursuing wealth at the time, but all of that kind of collapsed on us. Ultimately, he died right at the onset of the Civil War. But there was another war during his lifetime. Yes, Sam?
The War of 1812.
Well, he was 12 then. So yes, that was within his lifetime. But there was another one that he did get intimately involved with.
The Mexican-American War?
The Mexican-American War. Does anybody know the ultimately big result of the Mexican-American War? Most of the West was acquired through the Mexican-American. Mr. Beach, from what we could see, he was not that interested in war. He was interested in speed and money. So he saw the westward movement as ways to make more money, and the faster you could do it, the faster you could get there, the better. And trade routes then became very interested to him. And he became involved in the war to the point where he actually went to Mexico via Cuba to talk to priests about how there was turmoil inside of Mexico and how they could leverage that turmoil to actually come to a peace agreement to keep the war from happening, but to still give the president a little bit of what he wanted. And the president actually, in his diaries, because people had diaries a lot in those days, more so than now, actually mentioned Mr. Beach in his diary.
Oh, really?
So, would that be a primary source of information?
Yes and no.
Yes and no? Okay.
Kind of.
What does primary source mean? I didn't ask you if it was true or not. I asked you if it was a primary source.
Primary source is coming straight from the source of the information.
If the president is actually writing his feelings of the day or what happened that day from his point of view, that is actually a primary source from his point of view might bias it a little bit in one direction or the other, in terms of what his values are and his truths are, but it is in fact a primary source. Diaries and letters and old pictures are like the archaeology of the middle American times. You know, it's not like you're going to go dig up pottery kind of thing, but you're going to actually have things that you can potentially read and examine in some way and draw some conclusion. He was publishing a paper, so there's a lot of content in papers, right? Every day, or at least weekly, there was content being created. So that's a source of information. But is the information in a newspaper a primary source?
No.
There you are correct, Sam. It is not. Because it's researched by someone who might not know the topic, and then they summarize it, and write it up.
They may also have their biases in it.
And they may also have their biases in it. It is a interesting bias that paper has. The Sun truly does. That might make Mr. Beach turn over in that grave that you're going to go see. I'm still trying to figure out, coming from primary sources, documents with his own point of view, the diaries that he's referenced in, the whole journey from New York City to Cuba, why Cuba, and then go to Mexico. He was not successful. Some people, in most of the small books you get, if you see any mention of him in history books related to the Manifest Destiny and the war, he could be called a spy because he had a kind of a directive from the president to go and do something, and that he was kind of speaking for the president, but he was kind of doing it kind of on the sly. But he was interested in getting the news of the war because that war was tied to the growth of the nation under this concept called Manifest Destiny. And I became curious about Moses Yale Beach because I thought this period of time between when he was born and right up to the Civil War kind of had some interesting parallels to kind of where we are today. And what happened during that period of time that we see might maybe repeating history or a little bit of a journey differently than history. But the first time I did one of these talkbacks about Moses Joe Beach, the headline of that morning was Manifest Destiny Back Again. So that meant that I was kind of on the right track of thinking, hey, this is kind of like the same story kind of being retold or rewritten.
Yeah.
So what do you think in 2025 a headline about Manifest Destiny was a story about?
AI takes over the world.
AI takes over the world? What does destiny imply? You're destined to, at 3:30 to go see the chickens. This is something that you know to be personally true. That is your destiny, right? And it's manifest in his knowing. So every day, Ray experiences manifest destiny. There's something that he knows intrinsically in himself that he believes should happen and therefore will happen because it's something he feels is right. And so the people in leadership at the time thought, even though they came over on boats and so forth and weren't indigenous people of the land of America, that somehow they had claim on the land that was westward. So it was their destiny to claim this land and grow it and make something marvelous. And there's a little bit of God connections in there, in this feeling, like, manifesting, where do you get this idea from? So there are some religious connotations to it. People who have this belief in manifest destiny tend to be religious in some way, or they tend to be very preoccupied with themselves and wealth. Yeah, two drivers of people's understanding of the world based on their values. So he was part of Manifest Destiny partly because he got involved with a young lady named Jane Storm. That was one of her many names. She had a married name. She took names, various names to write under her bylines. She was actually taking on female names, which was interesting because usually female writers at the time were taking on male names. But she knew the people in Washington enough that she literally talked and wrote to the Secretary of State. She would walk into his office without an appointment. She was an interesting character, so interesting that almost every volunteer that's been part of this project said, "Can we do Jane's story?" Jane wasn't born in Wallingford, so not our priority here at WPAA-TV, but she is a significant part of the story. She is significant because it's been confirmed through handwriting and word analysis and content analysis that she coined the term Manifest Destiny. In fact, this summer, the teens worked on a project called Manifest Destiny 1845, in which they went and did a little bit of a deep dive on that whole thing of the Oregon Trail, the Trail of Tears, all of that part of history where the destined were going west to become rich. Which brings us back to William. William, who inherited the mansion here in Wallingford. He actually ended up going to California. What were people driven to the west besides the Oregon Trail and just freedom and wanting land for themselves? What brought people west more than anything else?
The gold rush.
Who do you think made money during the gold rush? Did they make money, the ones that rushed west?
Not really.
Did they occasionally find some gold?
Yes.
Yeah. But what did they need in order to go west and to do their searching for gold?
Information.
Information.
Maybe maps. Here's where we think that stuff should be. What?
Wagons.
Wagons. And a wagon. And when you're digging for gold, what do you dig with?
Tools.
Tools. Yeah. And so where do you get things like wagons and tools?
A trading post.
A trading post. And guess who had a trading post?
William?
William had a trading post. Another little story, another little tidbit that's tied to Mr. Beach and American history. So we have a trading post, we have a school built for black children who were freed during the war. We have paper mills being made and rag cutters so that newspapers can be printed. We have young entrepreneurs. There are all kinds of really neat little stories tied to Mr. Beach and his pursuit of wealth with the help of pigeons because he wasn't successful with steamboats. And do you think that might make him worthy of having a school named after him?
Possibly.
Possibly. So that isn't even the most significant thing about him. You haven't heard the most significant thing yet. It is tied to the newspaper, and it is tied to the war. It was revealed through primary sources, was that he was the founder of the Associated Press. What is the AP? That's still around, even though the house isn't. So is that part of his legacy?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. The AP, the Associated Press. Anybody have a clue what that is?
It's basically to get the stories right and make it not distorted.
They have principles, ethical journalism principles to try to get it right. What happened in the world of journalism, though, was the internet turned the interest in speed and getting it first to be the primary thing over necessarily getting it right. But the Associated Press does have that legacy and that value system of doing it right. But it started with the idea of cost of getting the story and how fast can the story be brought back to the East Coast and then to the world. The Associated Press was the gathering together, the syndication, again, a piece of the experience of history that we see today, where something can be written in one location and shared in other places. So it's a syndicated news story. So the Associated Press could be in the New York Times, it could be in the Record Journal, it could be in the Hartford Courant, and a writer for the Associated Press could have his pieces picked up and printed just about anywhere. So the Associated Press is a significant part of the journalism ecosystem of today. And it is tied now more than ever to fairness and accuracy and trying to hold up those values. So do you think that maybe being the founder of the Associated Press should be of interest to people in Wallingford? I mean, is that something that's significant to the world?
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
to the world. Every once in a while, the community hears about it, and there's a story. Oh, I think it was 2007 and 2017. You know, the story comes up of him being the founder. But then this community has one newspaper article, and then it fizzles, and nobody really thinks beyond that. So the AP is very significant to the world. Wealthy Citizens of New York, actually, as a directory of people that were important and influential at the time, is significant to the world, even though the accuracy of some of those stories are contested by the families. But it was the first kind of networking thing. It was the first directory. It was used for marketing. Very influential kind of media approach introduced by Moses Beach. Syndication by Moses Beach. Stories that are serialized. All of these things, if you're at all interested in journalism, he is significant to journalism. But the weird thing about it is not too many people talk about this guy who's had such influence. So there's something about either his personality or his multi-diverse interests that don't necessarily have him surface, which is why we're trying to have him revealed. We're trying to have him revealed to us and what we find. So we're not quite sure why the things that he influenced so much are not well known. in terms of those connections to him. But he was definitely connected to things like supply chain, the ability to supply paper to a newspaper. Supply chain, you may have heard in the news, is very important. During COVID, supply chains broke down, and the world almost, there was collapse of all kinds of entrepreneurial things because of supply chain. And being able to have supply chain and know the routes to things, very critical. And he thought that way. That's a way that he viewed the world. He would see, oh, I want to be able to get things to San Francisco. And I'm going to make it personal, because he did, for William to open his, what did William open?
Trade post.
A trading post, yes. In the little manifest destiny, we called it Beach Express. But yes, a trading post. So the Associated Press is one of the key things that he contributed to the world. So we're going to go back to the book that we wrote here at WPAA-TV, The Check Minus. And there are 2 stories in that book. And originally when we planned this get together, the thought was that you might have been at the cemetery before coming here. So part of me is like, do I reveal this? Do I reveal this or not? But there is a heritage marker. Somebody who's pursuing being an Eagle Scout was doing this project where these markers were going to be put, historical markers with little stories about the place that they were being put. So there's a marker about Lyman Hall in the cemetery, and there's a marker about Moses Yale Beach. And it becomes one of the mysteries in the story, and we're going to have her tell us what that mystery is. Oh, we can't because you didn't go there yet. But when you go to the cemetery to see something else that speaks to legacy, you're going to see a lot of obelisks in that cemetery, which are not that common. And they're very plain, they're very puritanical, they're very simple, but Mr. Beach's gravesite is not at all simple. It's very ornate, very much like the columns on his house, an Italianate floor to them. It's very high. And in our story, a young boy that comes from Morocco looks out the window and can see these things that look like obelisks that he is familiar with from where he was born. And so he would go to the cemetery, and he gets to one of these obelisks, and he realizes that it's a name familiar to him, and that's where the story goes. But he is writing a biography. When you write a biography of someone, I mean, you've done it, right? You go and look up at things, and what is your major source before Google? Before you just went and put something in your phone to search, how did you do a history paper? How did you look things up? Books. And were there any particular kinds of books that you would look things up in? Dictionaries and encyclopedias. It's hard to find encyclopedias in print these days, right? But there's still encyclopedias on the internet. And so are those primary sources?
No.
No. Okay. But they use source material from somewhere. Somebody writes up these little pieces for the encyclopedia, and somebody wrote very similar to what this Eagle Scout did. He took something that was going to be the equivalent of what you'd see in an encyclopedia, a little summary of Mr. Beach. And he calls him an entrepreneur, I think, when you're looking at it, see if that word shows up. I don't know if wealth, speed, and legacy show up there. So if they don't, that means he might have missed something about understanding the man, but his sources were predominantly encyclopedias. And in the encyclopedias, very similar to some of the folks in the story Check Minus, they filled out their little graphic organizer and said date of birth, date of death, a couple of things that you did in your life, and that was their report, passed in the report in school. Moses Y. Beach was born. All right? And this Eagle Scout starts his little marker. Moses Y. Beach was born. And this marker is sitting in front of the gravesite. And guess what? The little marker and the gravesite, date of birth, do not match. I got someone curious over there. They do not match. How could that even be? Is a gravesite potentially a primary source?
No,
No,
absolutely not.
it could
No.
be. Like,
So why no?
Because you're not actually making it, and or people don't understand. Like if you're facts, sometimes facts can be scrambled, and your like your birth your document that birth could be missing, and you don't know what it is.
Okay, so there's potential inherent problems with that. But if your monument to yourself was made before you died, do you think that its chance of being accurate might increase?
Absolutely.
Would you check and say, yeah, that's got my birth date right. I like how those swirls work. Yeah, it's all, I'm going to give my stamp of approval to the person who etched this information into this stone for me. So if, in fact, the marker was handled by the family and or by the person who was going to be marked in the grave with it, the chances of it being a good primary source are very high. When people pass away, what is the typical way, besides now Facebook or something like that, what is the way people write up these stories of the people that they've lost? What are they called? Does anyone know? Obituaries. Somebody in the choir said it. Okay. Obituaries. Obituaries. And when famous people, people of significance in the world pass away, do we hear about it? Is it a
Yeah.
news item? Oh yeah, this band member or whatever. People of significance have their little obituary stories on the news, written in the newspaper, printed in the newspaper. So in his day, as the publisher of The Sun, one of the major newspapers out of New York, Mr. Beach was significant enough to have a obituary written, a very long obituary written, in the New York Times in 1868. And what was printed in major newspapers in New York sometimes was used as filler in small newspapers in Missouri, Tennessee, Vermont, Ohio, all the way into that grand west that we were destined to have as ours. And so they took a portion. They didn't write the full column obituary that was in the New York Times, but they did usually say the same thing you would put in your school report. Born, did a few things, similar to the marker that's in front of his gravesite. So there would be these little... So the date of birth is printed in many newspapers and many encyclopedias, and it's the same one that's on the little legacy marker that the Eagle Scout made, but it's not the same one on Mr. Beach's gravesite. So this obituary written in the New York Times, is that kind of a reliable source, you think? Pretty reliable. New York Times? Yeah. A lot of Associated Press articles get put there. It's got a good reputation for fairness and good news and solid piece of journalism all the time, pretty reliable. Not everybody agrees with that. Definitely the people who are writing The Sun today do not agree with that. They basically say, the New York Times got it wrong again. The New York Times got it wrong again. So there's this little thing still going on in the legacy now of Mr. Beach. It's quite fascinating, actually, for those of us that are nerds that way. But anyway, it was printed in his obituary in the New York Times in 1868 that he was born on January 7th. And it's in encyclopedias, and it was printed across the nation at the time, and it's wrong. But where do you think that writer of the obituary got it from? That was my question. Why is it wrong? Where did he get it from? He didn't talk to family. The sons, Moses Berry was still around writing the paper. Did it get double checked in any way? Apparently not. And we did some research, and in the book in the back you'll find the little story of where it actually, we believe, the source of that error came from. Okay? So stories were very critical to his idea of getting people interested in communicating with each other and getting the news and sharing and interacting and building community and building wealth and building legacy. And it all comes together around, what did Mr. Beach leave us? So very many things. Anybody want to tell me some of the things that he left us now to wrap this up? What did Mr. Beach leave us, Willow?
You're pretty.
Huh?
AP.
The AP. What else did Mr. Beach leave us? Caitlin?
The Sun paper.
The Sun paper and the legacy that somebody's trying to restore in some way. Any ideas that kept him motivated to move forward?
Well,
Wealth and
Legacy.
legacy. And his legacy was through his children and through his monuments to himself, his gravesite and his home. And on that note, you'll get to have a legacy cookie. That's the conclusion of this. Any questions? Yes?
so nobody really knows his exact birth date.
No, his exact birthday is on the gravesite.
Okay.
We will see that when we go out to the cemetery and see it.
Yeah, his exact birthday is on the gravesite. Any other questions?
Not a question, more of a statement that the book was really good and people should actually check it out and read it.
Where can you find that book?
On the website.
On the website? What website would that be?
WPAA-TV.
We're going to definitely have to edit that.
Yes, please.
WPAA-TV/MYB, where you can read it or listen to it. Thank you for coming. I hope you found history interesting today. He certainly did. It almost put him to